Hey, good to have you back. Before we get into it, I want to say something small and a little unusual for a channel like this. Sit down, get comfortable, maybe grab whatever you're drinking, because what I'm about to walk you through isn't just a headline, it's a hinge. One of those moments where you can actually watch a political coalition crack in real time, and I think in a year we'll look back and mark this week as the start of it. So, let's not waste the cold open. On July 1st, in an interview with the Columbia Journalism Review, Tucker Carlson said something that, if you'd told me 2 years ago he'd say it, I'd have laughed you out of the room. He said he's done. Not done with politics, done with the Republican Party. And not just done watching from the sidelines either. He said he's going to help build a third one, a new party, from scratch, in America, 4 months before the midterms. Now here's where most coverage of this stops, at the headline, the soundbite, the clip that gets clipped again. I want to do something different. I want to actually walk through why this happened, what it means for the country that's about to live through it, and why the timing might be the most important detail nobody's talking about enough. Let's start with the cause, because there is one, and it's not vague. Carlson didn't wake up one day disillusioned with the GOP in the abstract. He points to a specific event, the war with Iran that began earlier this year. He told the Columbia Journalism Review he hasn't spoken to President Trump since that war started, and he didn't soften it. He said he feels sorry for a man he no longer sees as fully in control of his own decisions. That's a serious accusation from someone who once urged Trump to pick his own running mate. This wasn't a policy disagreement over tax brackets. Carlson's argument is that Trump ran and won on a promise to keep America out of exactly the kind of war he says the Iran conflict became. And that breaking that promise broke something in the coalition that can't just be patched over with a good debate performance. But the Iran war is only the spark. The fuel had been building for a while, and it's economic. Carlson laid out the argument like this. If you're making $60,000 a year in this country right now, you are, in his word, degraded. Life expectancy trending the wrong direction. The promise that your kids will do better than you did, quietly disappearing, and almost nobody in Washington treating it like the emergency he thinks it is. Whether or not you agree with his politics, that specific complaint, cost of living, wage stagnation, a shrinking sense of forward motion, is not a fringe feeling. It shows up in poll after poll, across party lines, as the thing Americans say keeps them up at night. Carlson's bet is that a message built around that anxiety, stripped of the usual foreign policy noise, is where an actual audience is sitting unclaimed. So here's the blunt version. War abroad, wages at home. Those are the two rails he says the current system has failed on, and he wants to build something new on top of both failures. Now let's get to the part of this story that I think is genuinely underreported, because this is where it stops being one man's frustration and starts looking like an actual structural problem for the Republican Party heading into November. Carlson is not doing this alone, and more importantly, he's not doing it first. Marjorie Taylor Greene, someone who spent years as one of the most loyal, most online defenders Trump ever had in Congress, resigned her seat at the start of this year after her own very public break with the president, largely over the handling of the Epstein files. And just one day before Carlson's interview published, Greene told Piers Morgan she is, in her words, in talks, having serious conversations about launching a, quote, true America-focused party of her own. She was careful to say it would take years, not months, to actually get off the ground. But she was just as clear that she and Carlson are both circling the same idea, from different directions at the same time, without, by her own account, having even coordinated on it directly. Two of the most recognizable names to come out of the MAGA movement independently reaching for the same exit door. That's not a coincidence you can wave away. That's a pattern. Let's slow down on that for a second, because the numbers around it matter more than the personalities. This is happening 4 months before a midterm election that will decide control of Congress. 4 months, not 4 years. In electoral terms, that's not early planning. That's a fire alarm going off mid-campaign. A functioning two-party system depends on both coalitions staying roughly intact long enough to fight the next election as they are. What we're watching instead is the most visible wing of one coalition openly discussing whether to walk away from it before that election even happens. Even if neither Carlson's party nor Greene's party appears on a single ballot this November, And by most reasonable measures, neither will. The discussion itself does something. It gives permission. It tells a disillusioned voter that leaving is not just possible, it's already being modeled publicly by the people they use to trust the most. Carlson was asked directly if this means he's running for office himself. He said no, flatly. He said he doesn't want to be a candidate. And when a previous interviewer warned him he'd be asked if he was running for president, he joked he was tempted to say he was running on what he called the pro-patriarchy ticket, just to make sure he picked up 0 new fans. That's worth sitting with because it tells you what kind of project this actually is, at least for now. Not a campaign, not a ballot line, an argument. A pressure campaign aimed at both existing parties, built by someone with an enormous media platform and, according to Greene, absolutely no shortage of people willing to align with him if he ever changed his mind about running. So, what does this actually cost the United States practically in the next 4 months, regardless of whether a single new party ever gets registered? A few things, and they're worth naming plainly rather than dramatically. First, it puts real pressure on Republican turnout math in districts that were already close, because you don't need a functioning third party to hurt a coalition. You only need enough of that coalition's most energized voters deciding the whole enterprise isn't worth showing up for. Second, it hands Democratic strategists a talking point. They didn't have to build themselves, that the party in power can't hold its own most prominent voices. And third, this is the one I think matters most for the country beyond this one election cycle. It puts foreign policy, specifically the question of unconditional support for Israel versus a more restrained America First posture, at the center of a Republican civil war for the first time in a generation. That fight used to happen quietly, inside think tanks and closed-door caucus meetings. Carlson and Greene just dragged it into the open, on camera, with millions of people watching. None of this means the third party happens. Ballot access laws in this country are brutal by design, built by the 2 existing parties specifically to make this hard. And Greene said as much herself. She called it a multi-cycle project, not a 2026 project. History is not kind to third-party efforts in American politics. They tend to peel off just enough votes to tip an election toward whichever major party they were angriest at, without ever actually winning anything themselves. That's the uncomfortable footnote every third-party conversation in this country eventually runs into, and it's worth remembering here too. But here's what I keep coming back to. You don't need a new party on the ballot to change how an old party behaves. Sometimes the threat does the work the vote was supposed to do. If Republican strategists are now having to wargame the possibility of a Carlson-aligned bloc sitting out November, or drifting toward whatever Greene eventually builds, that changes candidate messaging, it changes ad spending, it changes which primary challengers suddenly look viable. The midterms haven't happened yet. But in a real sense, this fight already started shaping them the moment Carlson said the words third party out loud to a national publication. So, where does that leave things? A former president's most influential media ally says he no longer trusts him. A former congresswoman who used to defend that same president on cable news every week is quietly building an exit ramp of her own. And the party both of them helped build now has to figure out, 4 months before voters decide who runs Congress, whether it can hold together the coalition that put it in power in the first place, using the same playbook against the very people who wrote it, whether that turns into an actual party with a ballot line, or just stays a very loud, very public threat, might not matter as much as everyone assumes. Either way, something already moved. That's Fenn for Borderlines. Analysis from the edge. If you want the next one the moment it drops, you know what to do.